Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Flipped History. Our topic today is the progressives and the progressive movement itself. Our objectives: you should be able to discuss and understand the origins and goals of the progressive movement, and you should be able to evaluate the impact progressive reforms had on the United States. Progressivism itself, what is it? It is reform efforts, which is to restore the economic opportunities and correct injustices in American life. This is at a point in our history where we're starting to see a gap widening between the very poor and the very rich. And the problem with these progressives is these reformers never completely agreed, but the one thing that you could always guarantee, they're going to share some certain goals, and there are four of them: protecting the social welfare, promoting moral improvement, creating economic reform, and then fostering efficiency. So these are very broad things that they could all come to agreement on in some capacity, but they never really agreed on a bunch of stuff together. So social welfare, first of all, what they want to do is soften the harsh conditions of industrialization, and think back to what those are, with the working conditions, dark, dingy, long hours, and getting paid very, very little. So what we're going to see is the development of YMCA, also libraries, swimming pools, and handball courts, which is going to promote a little bit of more leisure activities. We're also going to see the creation of the Salvation Army, which is going to be set up for poor people, people that can't afford a lot of things. It's going to be there to help them. And also Florence Kelley is going to be an advocate for improving the lives of women and children. And this is going to be a very early kind of women's movement here. This is what's going to gain some steam as we get into the turn of the century. Now, moral improvement itself, what exactly are we talking about? And this is basically prohibition. And a lot of these women's groups are talking about prohibition being the key to improving lives. What they're saying is alcohol is undermining morals. And you take a look at this image here. Help me to keep him pure. Please vote against the sale of liquors. What women are thinking of at this point, or believing, is that if there is no more alcohol in the country, then the men are not going to go get drunk and they're not going to go home and abuse their wives. The Women's Christian Temperance Union, WCTU, are going to spearhead this campaign. They're the main supporters of this, and it even gets to the point where they walk into some of these saloons singing prohibition songs and kind of telling people how awful that alcohol is right directly in front of them as they are in these saloons. Now, economic reform, the Panic of 1893 is really going to start people's questioning of the capitalist system. Is this the right type of system? Should we think about altering this market system that we have? Some of these guys are going to embrace socialism, and Eugene V. Debs is one of those guys. Remember back when we were discussing industrialization and labor unions. He is the one that is going to be an advocate for those industrial workers of the world and the potential overthrow of that free market system. He believes there's an uneven balance of business, government, and ordinary people in the free market. Business owners are the ones getting rich, government is very hands-off, and ordinary people are the ones that are being taken advantage of. So in 1901, he's going to develop the American Socialist Party, where it's all about working for each other versus working for a big business. And here's a quote from Eugene Debs. Competition was natural enough at one time, but do you think you are competing today? Many of you think you are competing. Against whom? Against John D. Rockefeller? About as I would if I had a wheelbarrow and competed with the Santa Fe Railroad from here to Kansas City. And this is from his life writings and speeches. So what he's saying is at one point, competition was natural. Competition was necessary. But now competition is getting out of hand. It almost goes along the lines of what Carnegie was saying with the gospel of wealth, that it really comes down to the fact of you have excess money, you should give it away to help other people. And a few of you even made the connection to what Carnegie was saying and communism, even though in the beginning of Gospel of Wealth, he kind of denounces communism in that institution. So last thing, worker efficiency. What we're talking about is breaking tasks into very simple parts. Okay, and there are problems with this. Okay, not all workers are going to work at the same pace. So workers are being forced to work like machines, but they can't work fast like machines repeatedly for hours on end. So what this is going to do is force high turnover rates, because there's going to be a lot of injuries. workers are going to be tired, they're going to lose focus, and they're going to get injured, and then they're going to be out of work. There's no workman's comp at this time. If you got injured, you were out of a job the next day. Bottom line, someone else was there to replace you. And Henry Ford is going to notice this and reduce the workday to 8 hours. This is going to become an industry standard come the New Deal era, but right now this is a cutting-edge idea for Ford to do that. He's going to raise his wages and cut the workday. So these people are going to feel like they're getting a great deal. He's just going to work them to the bone for those 8 hours straight. You can see here, this is the flywheel factory. There's putting in bolts and shipping it down the assembly line for each person to do one small task over and over repeatedly for their entire shift. And here it is specifically with Henry Ford. Gold Rush is started by Ford's $5 offer. He's going to offer $5 a day, which is going to be a big-time boost in pay for a lot of these people. And the regulation of industry, immigrant children are going to be sent to work, and what we're trying to do is try and end child labor here. Reformers are trying to do that. In 1904, the National Child Labor Committee is going to be formed, and through the Keating-Owen Act in 1916, the idea is to limit working hours. 1908, the Supreme Court is going to limit working hours for women until 10 hours a day. By 1917, the workday for men is going to be cut to 10 hours a day. And progressives are also going to win workers' compensation. So in case you do get injured at work, you can get compensated, not just be out of a job. And if you're crippled or injured or lose an arm, that you can actually be compensated instead of basically not being able to work at all. And election reform is really one of the biggest ones that these progressives are going to get passed. The first thing is an initiative, which is a law that's going to be proposed by the people. So it's not just going to be the government anymore that can propose a law. You could initiate a law if you get the proper number of signatures. You could also, after the initiative process, the referendum is the vote on that initiative. And also now, if we don't like our elected officials, we can recall those particular members and force them to face another election. This is what we did with the Gray Davis here in California a few years ago with Arnold Schwarzenegger winning the recall election and becoming our governor. And one of the biggest ones of them all, in my opinion, is the 17th Amendment, the direct election of senators. Prior to this, each state legislature was able to choose its own senators, which through grafts and kickbacks and some other things, it was highly corrupt. What this is going to do now with the 17th Amendment is force these senators to answer to the public or run the risk of being voted out. And really what this is going to do is make these people responsible to their constituents. And now some specific muckrakers, these early investigative journalists. There are 7 of them listed here, but there are many more than just these 7. These are kind of the major guys. Lincoln Steffens is one of them. He's going to write The Shame of the Cities and Tweed Days in St. Louis. Ida Tarbell is going to write the history of the Standard Oil Company, which is going to be published in McClure's Magazine. And McClure's Magazine is almost can be considered like the TMZ or 60 Minutes of the turn of the century. Jacob Rees, we've talked about him previously, How the Other Half Lives, and talking about the lives of immigrants in New York City. And that's that photograph book about the wretched conditions in the cities and the slums. Upton Sinclair and The Jungle, detailing the lives of stockyard workers in the meatpacking industry, which we looked at that in class. Thomas Nast, we looked at him with Boss Tweed and the cartoonist. Remember, Boss Tweed was one of those guys saying he doesn't really care what these guys write about him, but when they start to draw cartoons of him and portraying him in a bad light, that's when he gets upset because he knows that his voters can't read, but they can obviously identify him from a picture. Lewis Hine, he's a photojournalist. You've probably seen many Lewis Hine photographs and never even knew it. You'll see a few in a second. And Ray Baker, writing about the coal mine conditions and child labor, and also Following the Colored Lines, which is very early expose writing on the racial divide in our country. Here's a copy of the McClure magazine. This is 1903. This is 9 short stories in color, and one of them is the story of Rockefeller, the second part of the history of Standard Oil by Tarbell. And Tarbell and a few of these other guys are going to break away and form their own kind of secondary muckraker magazine much later here. Here's a Lewis Hine picture in the mill, 1900. This is a Carnegie steel mill, and you can kind of see in this picture, it's not the greatest of conditions. There is electricity, but you can still kind of see it's very smoky and dark, and you really don't want to fall off your game here in the 12th hour of your shift because you could very much end up crippled or dead. Here's another one. This is it's called Old Timer Keeping Up with the Boys on the Empire State Building. Very long title, but you can just check this guy out right here. He is on top of this building, and he's got a wrench, and there's no tether, there's nothing there holding him there, just other than him straddling the beam there. This is the one you've probably seen many times over. Maybe it's been in a restaurant or something like that, where these guys are just sitting on top of this beam about to eat their lunch. Absolutely crazy being this high up. And these guys would walk these beams like it was nothing, like they're 5 feet off the ground, but they're hundreds of stories up. So muckrakers are still around today. It's not a turn-of-the-century thing, okay? Here's one of them, unsafe at any speed, the design and danger of American automobiles, Ralph Nader. This is really what's going to get him off the ground. Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, All the President's Men, chronicling the Watergate scandal. Nickel and Dime talking about the minimum wage in our country. Democracy Now!, take a look at that. Also, Michael Moore, and not just Sicko, but Bowling for Columbine and a few others. Fast Food Nation, chronicling the fast food industry. And we all know our favorite, Super Size Me. I'm sure you wanted a Big Mac like I did after watching that. And then also The Corporation, which has been linked on ETUSD. It is really showing the ways that big business can take advantage of people. It's a really good documentary. I suggest if you have time to check it out. So let's recap this thing. You should be able to discuss and understand the origins and goals of the progressive movement and evaluate the impact progressive reforms had on the United States. So that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.